Welcome, everybody, to another Kushki Talks session. This is the fifth session. We're going to be focusing on payments today, industries that are transforming the payments world. Really, the thing that strikes me is that everything is going digital, payments are going digital, the world is going digital, and nowhere is that more apparent than in Latin America. And what we've got a team of experts here. We've got two people someone from Kushki and someone from Statista, because we're talking about this new report that they've just created, which is really analyzing the digital ecosystem in Latin America. We're going to be delving into 5 different industries: fintech, retail and e-commerce, food delivery, shared mobility, and tourism. And we're going to be talking about what they've discovered in this report. We're going to be talking about a lot of the different things that have come out of this research. So this is going to be, we're talking about the different countries as well: Mexico, Chile, Colombia, Peru, that have been the targets of this report. And with that, I'm going to firstly, I should introduce myself. My name is Peter Renton. I am chairman and co-founder of Fintech Nexus. We're a leading digital media company focused on fintech, and we are in the USA, Latin America, and Europe. With that, Gustavo, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. I'm Gustavo Monteiro. I am SVP of product here at Kushki. Been with the company for over 1.5 years, and I'm glad to be here talking about digital innovation.
Okay, Eike?
Hi, everyone. My name is Eike Hartmann. I'm the Senior Director of Data Insights at Statista Q. Probably many of you know Statista as a data platform that's providing insightful information about markets and consumers with a strong focus on digital markets. Statista Q is the department within Statista that is doing bespoke market research projects, as this one that we have done together with Kushki, and I'm really looking forward to sharing some insights out of this study today.
Right. So maybe we can, talk a little bit about some of the background here. And this is, Kushki teamed up with Statista. You're going to be to analyze the advances, challenges, and opportunities that have shaped the Latin American business landscape in the 5 industries I mentioned. So maybe we can start with you, Gustavo, and talk about what was the idea behind this study. Why did you do it?
Well, I think there's still a lot to be done here in Latin America when it comes to digital enablement, digital innovation, and having a study to essentially organize your thoughts, to give you that starting point, can be quite valuable and helpful for several companies, right? Including ourselves. So I think that's the primary reason.
Okay, so let's get into it. What, Eike, maybe you can kick us off with what are the unique factors that have really helped Latin America embrace digital transformation and increase economic development?
Of course, there's multiple drivers, and there's the basic drivers that apply for other regions in the world as well, like growing internet penetration, growing mobile adoption, but also the countries and the governments have done their homework right to a lot of extent. So driving digital education, for example, improving infrastructures. But there's also very strong internal factors in the countries that we analyzed, both on the demand and the supply side. One good example is that countries and societies in Latin America have a very strong willingness to embrace new digital technologies. So it's well known, for example, that social media usage is very high in Latin America. But also the adoption of new technologies, like a good example that I found when we did the research for the study is that, for example, the adoption of image recognition tools is the highest in the countries in scope globally, according to a report done by We Are Social that Statista was data partner for. But there's also a very strong entrepreneurial spirit in the region. There's very vibrant startup ecosystems in cities like Santiago, Mexico City, Bogota, or Lima, that are really hotspots driving this development. So I think those are key drivers for the very vibrant development of the region.
Okay, Gustavo, what about from your perspective? What have been the drivers?
Yeah, I think my answer is somewhat similar to Eike's. I think it started off with the few successful use cases that we have in different industries. So you think of the Nubanks of the world, the Rappis of the world, the ones that really broke the inertia and started this digital change and showed to the rest of the ecosystem that there was a better way of doing things. And that got the ball rolling. But then on top of that, I think we had a few other external factors, COVID being one of them, that acted as catalysts. Then regulators also woke up to the fact that fostering more competition is actually better for the economy, and made it easier for new entrants to join the market, especially in the fintech environment. And then alongside that, I think the rise of open protocols like open banking, open finance also are helping level the playing field and bring in more innovation, more players, and ultimately more convenience for all of us that use those services.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to delve into each of the 5 different verticals that I mentioned in the beginning. First one we're going to talk about is fintech. It's the area that I'm most interested in and certainly most expert on. The fintech has really developed very strongly in Latin America. I first started paying attention in 2018, and we had our first event in 2019, and really we've seen the industry take off over the last 5 years, and it's really gained tremendous traction. It's made a huge impact on the region, and there's several factors that we're going to get into here, but one of the things that I think Latin America was uniquely positioned for is that there was limited access to traditional financial services, and those that did have access, often the products weren't very good, and so it left a huge opening. At the same time, technology was improving, and we had mobile technology specifically getting a lot of developments there that made it easy to do financial services on a mobile phone that wasn't possible just a few years before. And then we have government support that has really helped be a catalyst for the driver of the industry. And we have the industry. There's a couple of statistics here that came from the report: 20% year-on-year growth rate by 2023, a high transaction volume of more than $334 billion in total. This is driven largely in part by the Mexican market. It's been a huge driver. So maybe we'll get to a couple of questions here. Maybe first one for you, Gustavo. Over the last few years, we saw an explosion of fintech companies in Latin America. Do you think this trend will continue, and why? And what current barriers do the new players have to overcome to be successful in the fintech ecosystem?
Yes, I do think we're still gonna see new players coming in, essentially because of what I said earlier. The space is still ripe for innovation. There's still a lot of work to be done. There's still most of the GDP of the region still flows through the old rails, so technology that has been around for decades, and we know that, especially with the advent of the newer technologies, namely cloud, for example. There are way better ways of being of doing stuff. So yes, I think more companies will benefit of this now more level playing field to come in and find better ways of doing things. But that doesn't mean that the future will be a future of startups only and new companies only. I think many of the incumbents have already gotten better at the tech game and are doing a better job of updating themselves and fighting to keep the relevance. But I certainly see a different market share composition coming in the next few years.
Okay, and okay, I'm curious about Mexico. I mentioned that they were one of the drivers of fintech growth in the region. What are the key elements for this growth in Mexico that could be replicated in other countries across Latin America?
I can basically just agree to what both of you just mentioned, and trying to provide a outside-in perspective from a market research perspective here. So trying to provide a holistic perspective. And you're fully right that Mexico is by far the biggest market out of the four that we analyzed, and also has the highest growth rate. Of course, you always have to put numbers in relative terms. So taking population into perspective, for example, the fintech market by capita is slightly higher in Chile, but keeping in mind that Chile, according to some rankings, for example, from the International Monetary Fund, is financially a little bit more advanced. The growth and the market size in Mexico is really impressive, and it's really catching up. And what you said, Peter, is totally right. So there still is a large unbanked population, and fintechs play a major role in for those people catching up, getting access to financial services. Also, the fintech ecosystem in Mexico is really impressive, with more than 600 companies being registered in that area, very actively being backed financially. A lot of interesting ventures in the region. But also the government in Mexico has introduced some reforms already starting in 2015 that really used to be a catalyst for the industry, introducing banking agents, for example, moving away from cash-based economy to new electronic and mobile payments formed. So that really went well and worked for the market. And also, when taking a look into the future, we at Statista, we have market models that do forecasts for markets. And for Mexico, for example, also for the next 5 years, we are expecting double-digit growth for the fintech markets going on, based on the great foundation that they have in this very vibrant ecosystem.
Okay, so let's move on to retail, and there's a couple of highlights from the report I just want to mention here. Moving on to the retail industry now. Retail industry is huge. It's the largest vertical in Latin America. $1.3 trillion of revenue in 2022. Revenue that's expected to grow 7% year over year, making it the slowest growing vertical, but obviously the largest. The share of e-commerce in the retail sector is growing at a faster rate than traditional retail, at 12% year over year in 2023, indicating the continued shift towards online shopping. The retail category with the highest total recorded income is undoubtedly food, with a year-over-year growth of 7%, followed by beverages and electronics with 6% and 3% year-over-year growth, respectively. The retail industry in Mexico has shown significant and continuous growth in recent years. In 2022, this industry achieved an impressive $399.98 billion in revenue, underscoring its importance and pivotal role in the country's economy. By 2023, revenue is expected to reach $424 billion, with year-over-year growth of 6%. This forecast not only underscores the robustness of the sector, but also highlights its ability to maintain steady growth. So, Eike, I want to go back to you. I want to talk about cross-border e-commerce retail. It's one of the largest segments of e-commerce purchases in Latin America. What are the key factors that make the Latin American region especially suited for this type of sale?
I think there's various reasons. So, of course, in general, if a market is getting more advanced, like the e-commerce markets already are in Latin America, consumers are more open to new opportunities, including shopping outside the country. It's really impressive how cross-border e-commerce is growing in the region. But I think it's also relevant to put it into perspective. So all of those markets are still dominated by domestic e-commerce players, but the cross-border e-commerce market is growing much stronger, providing opportunities and challenges for the market. So it's usually around 15 to 25% with regards to cross-border e-commerce for the countries that we analyzed in the study. And what is also very interesting is that there's different patterns. So with regards to which markets they are trading with. So for example, in Mexico, it's largely US dominated. So e-commerce, cross-border e-commerce with the US accounts for almost 50% of cross-border e-commerce, followed by China. But in other countries like Peru, for example, it's kind of the other way around. So there's a lot of cross-border e-commerce with China, for example, and the US is following second. So consumers in the region are really open to check out different options, looking for bargains. It's really an intense competition also for the regional players, but they are performing well in these regions. And also governments implemented some favorable policies, for example, that promote cross-border e-commerce, like reducing import taxes. That has also been a catalyst for this impressive growth of cross-border e-commerce in the region.
Okay. So Gustavo, cross-border requires high capabilities in terms of logistics, inventory, and a deep knowledge of regulation. It also requires a sound payment strategy. What are the key factors of payments that a company that's aiming to start their cross-border strategy should take into consideration?
Sure. Well, I think in the end is not too different from a general e-commerce payment strategy, in the sense of you gotta have the right payment methods and ensure that they operate at the highest capacity. The trick here is that the fact that you're doing at times an international transaction will add complexity to that task of ensuring that you have the highest capacity. So you got to really understand the transaction flow and life cycle, so you can tweak the right parts of that flow. Then the second step is ensuring that if you are the provider, that you have the means to timely fund your customers, to timely fund your merchants, so that you can minimize their exposure to FX risks. And finally, but no less important, ensuring that you have your homework made when it comes to taxes. So ensure that you are compliant on the different territories that you're touching, or at the very least that you know the kind of tax risk that you're entering into by doing a cross-border operation.
Good advice there for sure. Okay, so we're going to move to online food delivery, and this has seen tremendous growth over the last few years. Obviously, we had the pandemic that brought people, basically stayed at home, doing a lot more food delivery. People who'd never tried it before, change consumers' habits basically. And then at the same time, obviously, with the mobile technology where it was sort of a perfect combination for that industry. And we saw some stats here. The online food delivery industry has revenue more than $24.5 billion US in LATAM during 2022. The industry is accelerating, reaching 24% year-over-year growth in 2023, with earnings of $30.46 billion. The meal delivery sub-segment in LATAM recorded revenue of $10.915 billion in 2022, projected to grow 21% this year. And the grocery delivery sub-segment is increasingly prominent and is growing above the vertical growth rate, especially in Peru. The sub-segment in Peru generated huge revenue, $1.124 billion, exceeding the revenue of this category in Colombia and Chile. So Gustavo, I want to turn to you. The food delivery industry has changed the way consumers interact, not only with restaurants, but with grocery stores, while creating new business models such as dark kitchens and tech players like Rappi, who are huge now. What are the main elements other industries can learn from the success of this vertical?
I think my answers here are more around mindset than actual key elements, and I'll explain a little bit. I think one, it's time and again, marketplace, the network effect of marketplaces shows up, right? Of how much more deliveries you see now just because you added this technology component that facilitates buyers and sellers to get together, right? And then the several incremental business models that you see coming from that connection, like the dark kitchens that now bring a lot of scale to several restaurants. But also, I think one thing is that pretty much everything can be optimized by e-commerce and technology, right? Pretty much every model. I think for a while, there was this, perhaps this false perception that you cannot buy groceries online, especially fresh items, because you just cannot rely on what you're going to receive. And those leaders, they show us that it's quite the opposite, right? If you do it right, you can actually have items that actually exceed the quality of the items that you would get if you yourself would go to the market and pick them up.
Okay. So Eike, over to you. Over the last few years, the main strategy of the online food delivery players, as well as the shared mobility industry, has been to lower the prices to attract customers. Is this sustainable in the long run? What does it take to win the so-called food delivery wars?
Very good question, Peter. So I think if you're in this business, it's a very interesting but also very challenging business, because it's a multi-sided marketplace. So you have to please customers. You have to make sure that you have good demand, that you have good supply. For example, if you are in the food delivery business, that you have restaurants or dark kitchens that provide what customers want. And especially in this time of labor shortage, you also have to make sure that you have your drivers that deliver the stuff. And to manage all three sides is really, really challenging. And of course, if you have a strong network, then you're in a much better position to thrive in such a market. And that's the main reason why there was heavy battles, lowering prices, but also a heavy marketing battle going on, large investments in advertising, especially in times of the pandemic, which was a one-time opportunity here to really develop a new market. And what I would like to do is to provide my European perspective here, because the situation was very similar, but there is a lot of consolidation going on right now in Europe, for example, with Get Here acquiring Gorillas, or Delivery Hero selling its operations in Germany to Just Eat Takeaway. So I think, of course, this can't go on forever. You can't lower prices to zero. There's some barriers sometimes. And many of those international players started setting EBITDA targets, trying to become profitable. I think in the end, it's not a winner takes all market. I think there's space for multiple companies having excellent executions, and there's very good players executing excellently in Latin America. And I think if you want to win in this market, it's not about lowering prices always. So because it's also about, of course, providing a great customer experience, having variety, having fast and reliable delivery, having an easy to use mobile app, driving innovation, having good partnerships on all three sides of this market. I think that's the kind of next phase, and we see already many of the players entering this phase right now, trying to become profitable and focusing on excellent execution.
Right. There's also, I know there's a huge amount of money that flowed into this industry. I mean, from America as well as other parts of the world, and that was meant that helped supercharge that growth. Anyway, let's move to shared mobility. This is something that I always appreciate when I'm traveling in Latin America. There's always huge amounts there's a lot of availability. And this is reflected in some of the numbers from the report here. Shared mobility, it's a highly profitable industry in LATAM. Revenues of 66.2 billion in 2022, expected to grow 18% year over year in 2023. This is driven actually by Chile and Peru. Chile shows the highest year-on-year growth in the study, with 25% of the total on the total revenue side and 28% on digital revenue. Meanwhile, the market share for digital revenue was 61% in 2023. In Peru, the revenue of shared mobility, $4.7 billion is expected, with a growth of 23% compared to 2022. In terms of digitally generated revenue, the strong growth of 27% is expected. Mexico has one of the largest and strongest shared mobility industries compared to other Latin American countries. Mexico quadruples the total industry revenue figures of countries such as Chile, Peru, and Colombia. With year-on-year growth at 16%, Mexico is expected to report approximately $20.629 billion in total revenue in 2023, showing growth of 16%. Meanwhile, digital revenue is expected to reach $10.818 billion, with year-over-year growth of 20%. Digitally, shared mobility in Latin America is expected to generate more than $43 billion this year, with 21% growth compared to 2022. Those are some large numbers. Eike, what are the key factors for Chile and Peru to drive the growth of the shared mobility industry?
I think the story is quite different for those two markets. But as you said, both are driving the growth in the region. And I think if you think about shared mobility, you also always have to think about alternatives. And an alternative, obviously, is running your own car if you own one. And car ownership is quite different. So Chile, out of the 4 countries that they analyzed, is the one with the highest car ownership. In Peru, on the other hand, is the one with the lowest car ownership. So it looks that is not the only reason. And Chile, for example, has an excellent public transportation system. According to various studies, like the Mobility Index by Oliver Meyerman, for example, it ranks to the very high. Santiago is one of the best cities in the world with regards to public transport. And of course, digital adaptation is also developing strongly there. So it's coming from despite having a lot of competition from people just running their own car, public transportation is very good, and it's being digitized, and that's driving the market there. Whereas in Peru, car ownership is the lowest, with just 116 cars per capita, compared to more than 400 in Chile. But based on that, of course, there's high demand for transportation, not running your own car. And there's companies in Peru that excellently fulfill the needs of the local population, also with a strong focus on digitizing those services. So it's different starting points, but as you said, both countries are really driving the growth in the region, based on excellent execution, according to the framework conditions they have.
Mm-hmm. Okay, turning to you, Gustavo. Mobile technology and digital payments have played a key factor in the growth of mobility as a service. Many consider that the next step for this industry is to increase the use of big data and AI to create new mobility solutions and products that can benefit both the direct users and the citizens of the cities where the companies operate by improving traffic flow. How does the payment ecosystem support these types of innovations?
Sure. Well, I think the gist of it is by becoming faster, more reliable, to truly create a ideally invisible interaction with the rest of the mobility system. If you think that AI or whatever other technology will essentially make those solutions even more automated, likely increase the likelihood of higher frequency transactions, that only means that the payments piece has to truly be embedded in all of those different solutions, and always deliver, right? It's essentially that. There are several new payments technologies coming into play that essentially help that level of embedding. So you can now put your payments credential safely in several different types of personal devices, and upload it in the cloud as well. And it's that kind of connection that will deliver that kind of seamlessness.
Interesting. Okay, so we're going to move on to the last category, which is tourism. In a comparison between digital and total earnings in the tourism industry in LATAM, the study found that online payments outpace the year-on-year growth of traditional payments, with 29% year-over-year growth. This growth is mainly driven by the markets of Chile, Peru, and Colombia. Peru has one of the highest year-on-year growth expectations in the tourism industry, with 32% year-over-year in total revenue of more than US $1.8 billion. Tourism industry in Colombia reports year-over-year growth of 29%, while digitally generated revenue grew by 33%, with a market share of 64%, 2% more than last year. In Chile, the tourism industry is predicted to reach 2.911 billion, representing a staggering year-over-year increase of 32%. In LATAM, about 25% of the population booked a hotel in 2022. Hotel booking volume, which includes all travel booked by users from the selected region, regardless of departure and arrival, recorded more than $19 billion during 2022, and the projection for 2023 is expected to reach just under 23.5 billion. Those are some big numbers. Year-on-year growth of 23%. Gustavo, so the tourism industry was one of the early adopters of digital payments, and now is one of the industries where payments outpace traditional, digital-only payments outpace traditional payments. In order to do so in Latin America, the companies adapted to the needs of the consumers by creating options like payment links, online booking, and offline payment. What other payments innovations came from adapting to the specificities of the consumer, and which of those have translated or should be adopted by other industries?
I think there are essentially two main categories. The ones that you mentioned are associated with the user experience and enabling someone with some different device or some different level of connectivity to have access to payments. I think another one that is now it's sort of trendy elsewhere, but has been around for some time in Latin America that is quite interesting, is the ability to pay installments because that essentially enables you to fit whatever item or service that you want to your monthly income, right? And it's essentially credit. Credit is something that has been around forever, but I think one thing that here in Latin America, merchants and essentially payments provider got right is that many people think of credit not in terms of how much money do I want to borrow, but it's, can I make that installment fit into my monthly income, right? That's how mostly people go by about thinking, all right, I want to buy a fridge, I want to buy a car, I want to buy a trip to somewhere. Does it fit my available income? So in that sense, I think if we can have more industries think of paying with installments, I think that will be helpful for a lot of people.
For sure, that's really been a big driver. I would agree. Okay, so Eike, the study reveals that Chile, Peru, and Colombia are driving the growth of this industry. However, Mexico is the most visited country in the continent. Why do you consider that the Mexican tourism industry is not growing at the rates of the other countries?
I think that Mexico is the biggest market is part of the answer. So of course, it's very difficult starting from such a high baseline to grow as strongly as the other markets. So Mexico is among the top 10 visited countries in the world. Has a very mature tourism industry. And of course, it's hard to grow strongly from such a base compared to the other countries. And of course, the destination had a challenging time, as all tourist destinations due to COVID, but performed really well. So according to statistics from the official statistics agency in Mexico, the market levels are on pre-COVID levels already, also catching up with regards to visitors. So it's still also to a large extent driven by contributions of visitors, but also the number of visitors is approaching pre-COVID levels, which is of course great. And the other markets are just markets that develop strongly, that show up on the radar of tourists around the world, and that's driving high growth rates. And of course, if you take a look on the Mexican market, there might also be some other reasons, like some security concerns that's discussed in the press, and that's definitely things that the Mexican tourism industry has to address proactively, especially with regards to foreign tourists, taking this seriously and addressing it proactively. But it's a great market, performing strongly, and I think the main driver is that it's just the biggest market with a very mature industry already.
For sure, obviously, lots of US tourists going down to Mexico every year. I'm often one of them. So anyway, we want to switch now to online Q&A. We've got some questions coming in here. Maybe we can get the first one. How are these industries adopting digital payments like crypto, prepaid cards, and digital wallets? Who wants to take that one?
So I think for digital wallets and prepaid cards, there's already a ton of incremental value there by having those payment methods. So you can sell more by supporting those. Crypto, conceptually, I think it's definitely the future of money, but in terms of sheer volume that you can take in as an e-commerce, I think it's still the very early years of acceptance, and then with the exception perhaps of some niche industries where the crowd is made of the consumer crowd is made of heavy users of crypto, there's still little money to be made. Yeah. But then crypto, so sorry to Crypto as an investment instrument, that is something else. That is an entirely different animal, and I think there's tons of money flowing through that, and it's only going to grow over the years.
Yeah, that's a whole different topic, which we're not going to be covering here.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question that we have here. Rappi has had a unique case of expansion going beyond food delivery to include fintech services, flight sales, insurance sales, etc. Do you think there's still room for other companies to have similar services? Are there any players you recognize?
I can take that one. So we're closely following the development of different players in the industry globally, and this trend towards super apps is very interesting, and also the different developments in different regions of the world. So, for example, that's very common in Southeast Asia, for example. It's less common than in Europe or the US. And Rappi is a great example of a company that's going into that direction very successfully in Latin America, really implementing a data-driven approach, utilizing the data they get from one business model to increase value add for customers in other areas. And they successfully manage the complexity that this business model has. And from my perspective, there's typically different entry roads into becoming a super app for market, such as messaging is a very common example, like WeChat in China, for example, but also transportation or e-commerce or financial services. So based on those different inroads, I think there's room for other players in the key market, but also in this kind of super app space. For example, we are also closely watching what Mercado is doing in the region, also extending its service portfolio across other verticals. But there's still a lot of room in this vibrant market in Latin America.
Okay. Another question here. Regulation has been a big barrier for innovation in Latin America. Which countries have been more open or flexible for the players of the digital ecosystem? Who wants to tackle that one?
I think there's a lot of new legislation coming out to level the playing field and enable more companies to join the fintech space. I will name Brazil, Colombia as two countries where I think there's a concerted effort from the central banks to bring more competition to the space.
Okay. I think that's all we have time for. I think we're going to have to leave it there. Gustavo, Eike, really appreciate your thoughts here. Thank you for the audience for watching. Of course, thank you for Kushki and Statista to produce this report. It's a great paper. Encourage everybody to read it in depth. It's a great service for the industry. So with that, I'll bid you farewell. Thank you very much, everybody.